I can claim to be the President of the United States of America, but that does not make me the President. I can say I'm 6 feet tall, but sadly, I won't be dunking with the greats in the NBA. I'm not 6 foot tall, if you didn't notice. I can claim to be a Christian, but just claiming to be a Christian does not make someone a Christian. Today, I want to talk about how it is not about perfection, how we can all be reborn, and how I want to call us to live what we say we believe. I chose this topic today because I've seen in my life and in lives of others how, like when I was young, I would go to church. I grew up going to church, and I would carry my Bible, the big one that can kind of thump people around, but I would never really open it. And when I would on a Sunday, you'd see the smoke and the dust just pooming out of it because of the unread passages, especially in those Old Testament passages that nobody likes to read but are very important. Now, to start off, it's not about perfection. Jesus is the substitute for our sin. Jesus died on the cross as the propitiation for our sin. And it's since we are separated from him, from God, he sent his son Jesus as a perfect sacrifice in our place. It's about trajectory, not perfection. Now, if you look at a Christian's life from the time they become, a little baby Christian to the time they die, let's say it's a 50 years of a person, being a Christian, you'll see growth. Now, if you zoom in, you'll probably see all the jagged ups and downs, the good stuff of, I read this, Bible verse and it was very impactful to me. Or, I went to this conference and the speaker was like, jazzing it up on stage, and that just made me want to love others better. Now, there are the low times too, like, maybe losing a loved one, or hard financial times where you don't know how you're going to pay rent, or maybe even not knowing what you want to do after college. That can be very daunting and kind of that low. But take Jeff Lamb, an older Christian in my church, he was addicted to drugs and alcohol for 29 years. But now he's out of that life, and he's in a better, more satisfying life. And he has grown a ton since he became that little baby Christian. And for me, in my life, I used to be lazy, like a bump on a log, just sitting there, eating chips, cheesecake. Well, it probably wasn't cheesecake. It was probably just regular cake. But nonetheless, I was lazy sitting at my house, and I wouldn't take initiative with my schoolwork. Now, that is okay because we are a people in progress. We are taking it one step at a time, growing and growing. Now, to move forward, we can all be reborn. Before someone is in Christ, we tend to do what we want to do and what we think is best. With Jeff Lamb, he was, going to the strip clubs, going to the bars, going to the dirty bookstore, and doing what he wanted. He had no self-control to stop those acts and to do the right thing of being there for his family and providing. And in my life, like I said, I was a bump on a log. I was lazy. Just the other week, I was on the phone with my mom, and I got mad. I didn't want to listen to what she had to say. I rose my voice. I wasn't very loving or kind, and I for sure wasn't patient, and I know I wasn't self-controlled. And I later had to say, "Hey, Mom, I'm sorry for getting angry on the phone and not listening. Do you forgive me?" And that wasn't easy, but luckily and thankfully, she said, "I forgive you." And that's what it's about. It's about growing. Now, when someone is in Christ, they have a new nature, being they're being changed to look more like Christ. With Jeff Lamb, when he started reading the Bible and going to church, he was being changed over time to look more like Christ. And now he goes to mission trips to Mexico and shares his testimony in prisons to those of his story of how Christ changed his life and how he can change those prisoners and everyone. And in my life, I'm reading my Bible on a regular basis and, applying what I'm learning. And now, with everything that I've said thus far, let us who call ourselves Christians live what we say we believe. Be the Christian we claim to be. Because I've seen in my life, like I mentioned a minute ago, how I was, going to church and I looked good on the outside. I really was putting on all the fancy church clothes and, making my hair all smooth. And I'd go to church and I'd sit there, but I'd go home and I would do what I wanted. I would sit on the couch, or I would lie to people to look good, to get out of trouble, or to make my friends want to be around me. And I'd make up stories all the time. But now that I'm living what I say I believe, I'm, like I said, reading my Bible and trying to apply what I'm learning. And recently I'm learning about what's called the fruit of the Spirit, which is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. And with my example of me getting angry at my mom on the phone, I'm not always that patient or loving or kind. And many times, I'm not the most self-controlled. Sometimes I do go for that third or fourth slice of cake when I already had 3 or 4, and one is just enough. And now, with Jeff Lamb and his story, he, like I said, he goes now to Mexico into prisons. And for the longest time with him, he was drugged to a Christian, event where it's like a gathering. And the speaker on stage said, who all wants to, become a Christian? And, he rose his hand and he kind of went down to the front and he, got on his knees and he prayed and he cried, and then he kind of left and went back to doing whatever he wanted. He didn't really have that change that is occurring. And he went back to that pastor sometime later, and he was like, well, I don't see this change, but am I, going to heaven? And the pastor said, well, you prayed the prayer, right? And he said, yeah, I prayed the prayer. And the pastor said, well, you're fine, you're going to heaven. But that was just kind of like a get out of jail free card, because Jeff would, once a year, he would get on his knees and weep and that, but he didn't have any real change. He wasn't growing. And then he heard a Bible verse on the radio that said, basically, if there's no growth and there's no change inside you, then you'll never go to heaven. And that really shocked him, and his eyes were open wide. And he began to read the Bible 1 page a day, 1 page a day, 1 page a day. And he slowly was transformed to before, like I mentioned, he was in the strip clubs and in the bars. And now he's truly living what he says he believes by sharing his faith in prisons in Mexico and by loving his kids. He's reconciled to his kids now, too. And he's living and loving his wife and his kids by providing for them. Now, to all of us who claim to be Christians, let us live what we say we believe. Today, I talked about how it's not about perfection, how we can all be reborn, and I called us to live what we say we believe as Christians. To quote Jeff Lamb, it doesn't happen overnight. Rarely does change happen overnight, but there is a starting point. Thank you.